a girl donated her only dress for charity. Years later, it came back to her in the most unexpected way. And when it did, she discovered that her single act of sacrifice had created a chain reaction of kindness that changed not just one life, but an entire family's destiny. This is the story of how giving everything, even when you have nothing, can come back to you in ways you never imagined. Imagine being 12 years old and knowing exactly how much money your family has. Not guessing, not wondering, knowing. Down to the last dollar. Down to the last coin. That was Maya's life. She lived in a cramped apartment on the 3rd floor of a building that seemed to lean slightly to the left, as if even the structure itself was tired from the weight of all the struggling families inside. The walls were thin, so thin that Maya could hear her neighbors arguing, laughing, crying through the plaster. She could hear their lives as clearly as if they were living in her own home. Her mother, Carmen, worked 2 jobs, sometimes 3. She'd leave before dawn, when the city was still dark and the streets were empty, except for the other desperate people trying to survive. She worked as a cleaner at an office building downtown, scrubbing floors and emptying trash cans while the wealthy people slept in their comfortable beds. Then she'd rush to a restaurant where she waited tables for minimum wage and whatever tips people felt generous enough to leave. On her best days, she'd pick up a few hours at a grocery store, stocking shelves and scanning items for people who didn't even look at her face. Maya rarely saw her mother awake. They existed in different time zones, even though they lived in the same apartment. Carmen would come home exhausted, her feet swollen, her hands raw from cleaning chemicals. She'd collapse into bed, and Maya would tiptoe around the apartment, trying to be invisible, trying not to add to her mother's burden. The apartment had 2 bedrooms, but they only used 1. Carmen slept in the bedroom. Maya slept on a couch in the living room that had a permanent dent in the middle from years of use. The couch smelled like old fabric and forgotten dreams. There was a hole in the armrest that had been there for as long as Maya could remember. She'd poke her finger through it sometimes, feeling the stuffing inside, wondering if the couch had once been someone's treasure before it became their hand-me-down. Food was a constant calculation. Carmen would stretch every dollar as far as it could possibly go. Rice and beans, pasta and tomato sauce, eggs when they were on sale, bread from the day-old bin. Maya learned early that complaining about hunger was a luxury they couldn't afford. So she didn't complain. She ate what was there, and when there wasn't much, she ate less. But the thing that made Maya different, the thing that made her special, was that despite having almost nothing, she noticed when other people had less. There was a boy in her class named David whose shoes had holes in the bottom. Real holes. You could see his socks through them. Maya noticed because she'd worn shoes like that once, before her mother had found a pair at a thrift store. She remembered the feeling of wet socks, the cold concrete seeping through the soles of her shoes. She remembered the shame of it. There was a girl named Jasmine who came to school hungry. Not just regular hungry, the kind of hungry where your stomach hurts and you can't concentrate on math or reading or anything else. Maya could see it in the way Jasmine's eyes followed the lunch line, in the way her shoulders seemed to shrink a little smaller each day. Jasmine's family had fallen on even harder times than Maya's. Her father had lost his job, and they were living in a shelter. Maya would share her lunch with Jasmine, just a little bit. Just enough to make a difference without her mother noticing. She'd wrap half her sandwich in a napkin and slip it to Jasmine between classes. She'd give her half her apple. She'd pretend she wasn't hungry so that someone else could eat. This was who Maya was. A girl with nothing who somehow found a way to give. Her most prized possession was a dress. Not because it was expensive or beautiful in the way that magazine dresses were beautiful. It was beautiful in a different way. It was a simple blue dress with small white flowers printed across the fabric. The color had faded slightly from washing, and there was a small stain on the hem that never quite came out. But to Maya, it was perfect. Her grandmother had given it to her 2 years ago, before her grandmother passed away. It was the last gift she'd ever received from her. The dress fit her then, and it still fit her now, though she was growing taller every month. Soon, it wouldn't fit anymore. Soon, she'd have to put it away. The thought of that made her chest tight. Maya wore the dress on special occasions, school dances, family gatherings. The few times her mother had a day off and they'd go to the park together, she'd wash it carefully by hand, using cold water and gentle soap, hanging it to dry away from the sun so the color wouldn't fade any faster than it already was. When she wore the dress, she felt different. She felt like the girl her grandmother had seen her as. Capable, strong, worthy of love. The dress was a connection to her grandmother, a physical reminder that someone had loved her enough to give her something precious. But more than that, the dress represented something else entirely. It represented the only beautiful thing in a life that was mostly just about survival. It was hope in fabric form. It was proof that good things existed, even in their small apartment with the thin walls and the broken couch. Maya was aware of her poverty in a way that most 12-year-olds aren't. She understood that her mother's exhaustion wasn't just tiredness. It was the weight of impossible choices. Should she buy medicine or food? Should she pay the electric bill or the rent? These weren't abstract questions for Maya's family. These were the questions that determined whether they'd have heat in the winter or whether they'd huddle under blankets and pray for spring. She'd overheard her mother on the phone with the landlord, explaining that the rent would be late. She'd seen the stack of bills on the kitchen table, each one stamped with red letters. Past due. Final notice. She'd watched her mother's face as she did the math in her head, trying to figure out how to make impossible numbers work. And yet, despite all of this, Maya remained kind, remained generous, remained hopeful. She didn't know it yet, but her life was about to change in a way that would test everything she believed about sacrifice and kindness. A moment was coming that would require her to give up the one thing she had, the one thing that made her feel connected to love and hope and her grandmother's memory. And what Maya didn't know was that this single decision, made by a girl with nothing but a generous heart, would set off a chain of events that would echo through years, touching lives in ways she could never have predicted. But that moment hadn't arrived yet. For now, Maya was just a girl in a faded blue dress, going to school, sharing her lunch with hungry friends, and trying to be invisible enough that she wouldn't add to her mother's burden. She had no idea what was coming. She had no idea that everything was about to change. And when it did, the dress would be at the center of it all. It happened on a Tuesday morning in late September. Maya was walking to school when she saw the poster. It was taped to the window of the community center, the one on the corner of 5th and Main. The poster was bright yellow, almost neon, and it immediately caught her eye. There was an image of a house surrounded by water, and the words were urgent, desperate. Maya stopped walking. She stood there on the sidewalk, reading the poster over and over, her backpack heavy on her shoulders. Around her, other people rushed past, adults hurrying to work, other kids heading to school. No one else seemed to notice. No one else stopped. But Maya stopped. The previous week, there had been a storm. Not just a normal storm, a historic storm, the kind of storm that made the news. The river that ran through the neighboring community had overflowed its banks, flooding entire neighborhoods. Families had woken up in the middle of the night to water pouring into their homes. They'd had minutes to grab what they could before evacuating. Minutes to save their lives. Maya had seen the news coverage. She'd watched the footage of people standing in front of destroyed homes, their faces blank with shock. She'd seen a little girl, couldn't have been more than 5 years old, holding a soggy teddy bear, the only thing she'd managed to save. The girl's mother was crying, not because of the house or the possessions, but because her daughter's entire world had been destroyed. Maya understood loss. She understood not having things. But she couldn't imagine losing everything you had, even if everything you had wasn't much. She took a picture of the poster with her phone. An old phone that her mother had given her. A hand-me-down from a customer at the restaurant. She wanted to remember the details. The address of the community center. The date and time of the charity drive. All day at school, she thought about it. During math class, she thought about it. During lunch, while she was sharing her sandwich with Jasmine, she thought about it. During English class, while Mrs. Patterson was reading them a story about kindness and community, Maya thought about it. What could she possibly give? That was the question that haunted her. She had almost nothing. Her family was struggling. They didn't have extra money. They didn't have extra food. They didn't have extra anything. But people had lost everything. When she got home that afternoon, her mother was already asleep. She'd worked the night shift at the office building and had come home at dawn, exhausted. She was sprawled across the bed, still wearing her work clothes, her shoes on the floor beside the bed where she'd kicked them off. Maya moved quietly through the apartment. She didn't turn on the lights. She didn't make noise. She just moved through the space like a ghost, thinking. What could she give? She thought about the food in their kitchen. There wasn't much. A few cans of beans, some rice, a loaf of bread. But these were the things they needed to survive the week. She couldn't give these away. Her mother was counting on them. She thought about her clothes. She had a few shirts, a couple of pairs of pants, some underwear and socks. All of it was worn. All of it was from thrift stores or hand-me-downs. But they were hers, and she needed them. And then her eyes fell on the dress. It was hanging on the back of her closet door, protected by a plastic dry cleaning bag that her mother had saved from somewhere. The blue dress with the white flowers, her grandmother's final gift. Maya walked over to it slowly, as if she were being pulled by something beyond her control. She reached out and touched the plastic. She could see the dress clearly through the transparent material. The faded blue, the small white flowers, the stain on the hem that wouldn't come out. Her heart began to pound. No, she couldn't give away the dress. Not the dress. The dress was the one thing she had that meant something. The dress was her connection to her grandmother. The dress was hope. She turned away from the closet and sat on her couch bed, her hands shaking slightly. But the thought wouldn't leave her alone. It followed her through the evening. It followed her while she did her homework. It followed her while she heated up leftovers for dinner and left a plate for her mother. It followed her while she lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling in the darkness. What could she possibly give that would actually make a difference? The dress was the only thing of value that she owned. Not valuable in terms of money, it wasn't worth much. But valuable in terms of meaning. Valuable in terms of love. Valuable in terms of her heart. The next day at school, she couldn't focus. She kept thinking about that little girl on the news, holding the soggy teddy bear. She kept thinking about all the families who had woken up to water destroying their homes. She kept thinking about what it would feel like to lose everything. At lunch, Jasmine asked her if she was okay. Maya realized she'd been staring at her sandwich without eating it. "I'm fine," Maya lied, just thinking about something. That night, her mother came home at a reasonable hour. It was a miracle. She'd gotten off early from the restaurant. She looked slightly less exhausted than usual, which meant she might actually be awake enough to have a conversation. Maya approached her carefully. Her mother was sitting at the small kitchen table, drinking a cup of tea that had gone cold. "Mom?" Maya said quietly. "Yeah, baby?" Her mother looked up, and even through her exhaustion, Maya could see the love in her eyes. "There's a charity drive on Saturday," Maya said, "for the families who lost their homes in the flood." Her mother nodded slowly. "I saw something about that. It's a terrible thing. Those poor people. I want to donate something," Maya said. Her mother smiled sadly. "That's sweet, Maya. But we don't have much to give. Maybe we could spare a few cans of food?" Maya nodded, but she didn't say anything else. She went back to her room and sat on her couch bed, staring at the dress hanging in her closet. Friday night came. Saturday morning was approaching. The charity drive was tomorrow. Maya lay awake most of the night, her mind racing. She thought about her grandmother. She thought about the day her grandmother had given her the dress. She remembered how her grandmother's hands had shaken slightly as she'd wrapped it. How she'd said, "This is for you, Mia. For when you need to remember that you're special." She thought about how the dress had made her feel. How it had given her confidence. How it had made her feel beautiful and worthy and loved. And then she thought about that little girl on the news. She thought about a child who had lost everything. She thought about families living in shelters, sleeping on cots, wondering how they'd rebuild their lives. She thought about what her grandmother would have wanted her to do. And in that moment, in the darkness of the night, with the city sounds filtering through the thin walls of the apartment, Maya made a decision. It was a decision that would cost her something. It was a decision that would require her to give up the one thing that made her feel connected to love and hope, and her grandmother's memory. But it was the right decision. She got out of bed and walked to her closet. She opened the door and looked at the dress. In the darkness, she could barely see it, but she knew every detail by heart. She reached out and gently took it off the hanger. She held it against her chest and felt the weight of what she was about to do. Then she walked to the bathroom and turned on the light. She filled the sink with cool water and a small squirt of her mother's gentle soap. Very carefully, she washed the dress. She washed away the dust and the everyday wear. She rinsed it gently, again and again, until the water ran clear. Then she hung it to dry, draping it carefully over the shower rod. She didn't sleep that night. She just sat in the darkness, thinking about what she'd done, thinking about what she was about to do. Saturday morning arrived gray and cool. Maya helped her mother gather a few cans of food, beans, soup, vegetables, and put them in a bag. Then, while her mother was getting ready, Maya went to the bathroom and took down the dress. It was still slightly damp, but it was clean. Perfectly clean. She folded it carefully, reverently, as if she were handling something sacred. Because to her, it was sacred. She placed it in a separate bag, on top of the food donations. Her mother noticed the dress as they were getting ready to leave for the community center. "Maya," she said, her voice catching slightly. "Is that—" "Yes," Maya said quietly. "I want to donate it." Her mother stared at the dress for a long moment. Then she looked at her daughter, and tears began to stream down her face. Oh, baby, she whispered. She pulled Maya into an embrace, and Maya could feel her mother shaking. Do you understand what you're giving away? Yes, Maya said. I understand. Are you sure? Her mother asked. Maya thought about the little girl on the news. She thought about families who had lost everything. She thought about what her grandmother would have wanted her to do. I'm sure, she said. They walked to the community center together, Maya carrying the bags of donations. Her heart was heavy, but it was also light. She'd made a choice. She'd given something that mattered. She had no idea that this single decision was about to set off a chain of events that would change not just her life, but the lives of people she'd never even met. She had no idea that the dress would become a lifeline for someone who desperately needed it. She had no idea that her sacrifice was about to come back to her in the most unexpected way imaginable. But the moment was coming, and when it arrived, everything would change. Elena had stopped believing in good things a long time ago. She was 34 years old, but she looked older. Life had a way of aging you faster than the calendar ever could. Her face was lined with worry. Her eyes had lost the brightness they once held, and her shoulders carried the weight of impossible burdens. She lived in the Riverside neighborhood, or rather, she used to live there. Now she lived in a shelter on the other side of town, in a room that she shared with her 2 children, Sophia, who was 8, and Marcus, who was 6. The flood had taken everything from her in a single night. Elena had been a housekeeper at a hotel downtown. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was honest work, and it paid the bills. She'd wake up at 5 in the morning, make lunches for her kids, drop them at school, and then spend her day cleaning rooms, making beds, scrubbing bathrooms, vacuuming carpets. She'd come home exhausted, help with homework, make dinner, and collapse into bed. Then she'd wake up and do it all again. It was a hard life, but it was her life. She'd built something. She had a small apartment, nothing fancy, but it was hers. She had her children. She had routines and stability and a future that, while not luxurious, was at least predictable. And then the storm came. She'd been working late that night, covering for a co-worker who'd called in and sick. She was in the middle of cleaning a room on the 3rd floor when her phone started buzzing. Messages from her neighbor, then from her sister, then from the emergency alert system. Flood warning. Evacuate immediately. Elena's hands had started shaking. She'd left her kids with a babysitter, a teenager from down the street who charged $15 an hour. She'd paid for 4 hours of childcare. She was supposed to be home by midnight. She'd run. She'd actually run, leaving her cleaning supplies scattered across the hotel room floor, leaving her shift incomplete, leaving everything behind. She'd run to her car and driven through the rain-soaked streets toward home. But she was too late. By the time she reached her neighborhood, the streets were already flooded. Water was pouring down the roads like rivers. Police officers in boats were evacuating people from their homes. She'd watched in horror as she saw her street, her block, completely submerged. She'd abandoned her car and waded into the water, desperate to reach her apartment, desperate to reach her children. The water was cold and rising, and it was terrifying. A police officer had grabbed her, had told her she couldn't go further, that it was too dangerous. "My children," she'd screamed. "My children are in there." The officer had radioed for help. They'd found Sophia and Marcus at a neighbor's house. The babysitter had had the sense to grab them and move to higher ground when the water started rising. They'd gotten them to safety. But everything else was gone. The apartment was destroyed. The water had risen nearly 6 feet, destroying everything on the first floor and damaging everything above. Her furniture was ruined. Her clothes were destroyed. The few possessions she'd accumulated, photos, mementos, things that had meaning, were all gone, dissolved into the flood water or rendered unrecognizable. She'd lost her job too. The hotel had sustained damage, and they'd had to let go of most of their staff while they did repairs. Elena had no income. She had no home. She had nothing except her 2 children and the clothes on her back. The shelter had taken them in. It was a large building that had been converted into temporary housing for flood victims. Rows of cots, shared bathrooms, the smell of too many people in too small a space. The sound of crying at night, from children, from adults, from people who'd lost everything and didn't know how they'd survive. Elena had spent the first week in a fog of shock and despair. She'd filled out forms, she'd talked to caseworkers, she'd tried to figure out how to rebuild a life from nothing. The second week, reality had started to sink in. She needed a job, she needed money. She needed to find a way to get her children out of this shelter and back into a normal life. But who would hire her? She had no address. She had no stability. She had no way to prove that she was reliable when she was living in a shelter, when everything about her current situation screamed instability. She'd gone to job interviews and seen the way people looked at her. She could see it in their eyes. The judgment, the pity, the assumption that she wasn't worth taking a chance on. One interview had been for a position as an office manager at a small company. It was a good job, the kind of job that could have changed everything. The salary was decent. The benefits were solid. It was exactly what she needed. But she'd shown up in her only clean clothes, a pair of worn jeans and a faded shirt that had belonged to her before the flood. The interviewer had looked at her and had been polite, but Elena could feel it. She could feel the moment the decision was made. This woman was a charity case. This woman was desperate. This woman wasn't the kind of person you hired for a professional position. She hadn't gotten the job. She'd gone back to the shelter that night and had sat on her cot next to her sleeping children, and she'd cried. She'd cried because she was tired. She'd cried because she was scared. She'd cried because she didn't know how to fix this. She'd cried because she felt like she'd failed her children. A week later, she'd gotten another interview. This one was for a position as a customer service representative at a call center. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid decently, and it was work she could do. But again, she'd shown up in her worn jeans and faded shirt. And again, she'd felt the judgment. She'd felt the moment the interviewer decided that Elena wasn't quite right for the position. She was starting to understand something terrible. It wasn't just about the skills or the experience. It was about presentation. It was about looking the part. It was about walking into a room and having people believe that you belonged there. And Elena didn't look like she belonged anywhere anymore. She was spiraling. She could feel it. She was losing hope. She was starting to believe that this was her life now, that she'd be stuck in the shelter forever, that her children would grow up in this place, that she'd never recover from the flood. And then Saturday came. The community center had announced a charity drive for flood victims. Elena had seen the poster. She'd thought about going, about taking what little they were offering, food, supplies, clothing. But she'd felt ashamed. She'd felt like she didn't deserve charity. She'd felt like accepting help was admitting defeat. But her caseworker had encouraged her to go. There might be resources, the caseworker had said. Job training programs, housing assistance, things that could actually help you move forward. So Elena had gone to the community center on Saturday morning, dragging her feet, feeling defeated before she even arrived. The place was packed. Volunteers were everywhere, sorting through donations, organizing items, helping people. There were tables laden with clothing, food, household items. There were people signing up for assistance programs, filling out paperwork, getting connected with resources. Elena had moved through the space numbly, collecting some items, a few shirts, some pants, some food for the shelter kitchen. And then a volunteer had approached her. "Would you like to look through the clothing donations?" the volunteer had asked. "We have some nice things. Maybe something you could wear to a job interview?" Elena had felt her throat tighten. A job interview, as if she had any chance of getting a job. But she'd followed the volunteer to a section of the room where clothing was organized by size and type. And that's when she saw it. The dress. It was hanging on a rack with other donations, but it seemed to glow. It was a simple blue dress with small white flowers printed across the fabric. It was faded, worn, but it was beautiful. It was the kind of dress that said, "I am put together. I am professional. I am someone worth listening to." Elena reached out and touched it. The fabric was soft, well cared for. Someone had loved this dress. Someone had taken care of it. "That's a nice one," the volunteer said. "Would you like to try it on?" Elena looked at the volunteer, then back at the dress. She was afraid to touch it. She was afraid that if she tried it on, she'd want it too badly, and then she wouldn't be able to have it. But the volunteer was already taking it off the rack and leading her to a changing room. Elena put on the dress. It fit perfectly. It was like it had been made for her. The color brought out her eyes. The cut was flattering. When she looked at herself in the mirror, she saw someone different. She saw someone who looked capable. Someone who looked like they belonged in an office. Someone who looked like they deserved a chance. There was a note pinned to the inside of the dress. Elena unfolded it carefully. The handwriting was childish, but the words were profound. "Dear whoever gets this dress, I hope it makes you feel as special as my grandmother made me feel. I hope it helps you remember that you're worthy of good things. You deserve to be happy. Maya." Elena read the note 3 times. Then she read it again. She stood in the changing room, wearing a faded blue dress with white flowers, holding a note from a child she'd never met. And something inside her broke open. Not in a bad way. In the way that happens when you've been holding everything in for so long that you forget how to let it out. She cried. She cried for everything she'd lost. She cried for her children sleeping on cots in a shelter. She cried for the life she used to have. She cried for the despair that had been crushing her. But she also cried because of the note. Because a child who clearly didn't have much, had given away something precious and had included a message of hope. A message that said, "You deserve to be happy." When had anyone last told her that? Elena took the dress. She kept the note. She folded it carefully and put it in her pocket, close to her heart. The next week, she had another job interview. This time she wore the blue dress with the white flowers. She walked into the office of a small marketing firm, and something was different. She stood taller. She made eye contact. She spoke with confidence. She told them about her experience, about her work ethic, about her reliability. And when the interviewer looked at her, Elena could see it. She could see the moment the decision shifted. This woman looked professional. This woman looked capable. This woman looked like someone worth taking a chance on. she got the job. It wasn't a glamorous position. She was hired as an administrative assistant. But it was a job. It was income. It was a way forward. Elena started work the following Monday, and she wore the blue dress. She wore it on her first day, and it gave her courage. She wore it on difficult days, and it reminded her of Maya's note. You deserve to be happy. Over the next few months, Elena's life began to stabilize. She saved money from her job. She found a small apartment, nothing fancy, but it was theirs. She got Sophia and Marcus out of the shelter and into real beds in real rooms. She enrolled them in school. She began to rebuild. And through it all, she kept the dress. She'd wear it on important days, job interviews for better positions, parent-teacher conferences, dates when she finally started to believe that happiness might be possible again. The dress became more than just clothing. It became a symbol. It became proof that kindness existed in the world. It became a physical reminder that a stranger, a child, had believed in her, had believed that she deserved good things, even when Elena herself had stopped believing. She thought about Maya constantly. She wondered who this girl was. She wondered what her life was like. She wondered if Maya knew the impact that her gift had made. And Elena made a decision. Someday, somehow, she would find Maya and thank her. She would tell her what the dress had meant. She would tell her how it had saved her life. She didn't know it yet. But that someday was coming. That moment was approaching. In 5 years, when Sophia and Marcus were teenagers, when Elena had been promoted to office manager and was thriving in her career, when she'd rebuilt a life that was better and stronger than what she'd had before. That's when she would find Maya. That's when the dress would come full circle. But that moment was still years away. For now, Elena simply wore the dress, carried the note in her pocket, and whispered a thank you to a girl she'd never met, a girl who had given her everything when she had nothing. 5 years later, Maya was 17 years old. She'd grown taller, her face had matured, but her heart remained the same. She was still the girl who noticed when others were struggling. She was still the girl who gave what little she had. Life had changed for her family in unexpected ways. Her mother, Carmen, had finally caught a break. She'd been working at a restaurant for 3 years when the owner had noticed her dedication, her reliability, her ability to connect with customers. He'd offered her a position as a shift supervisor. It wasn't a massive salary increase, but it was stable. It was a career path. It meant that Carmen could finally breathe a little easier. They'd moved out of the cramped apartment on the 3rd floor. They now lived in a modest house with a small yard. It wasn't fancy, but it was theirs. Maya had her own room, a real room, not a couch in the living room. She had a bed. She had a desk. She had space to exist. Her mother had taken her to visit her grandmother's grave on the anniversary of her death, like they did every year. They'd brought flowers and sat on the grass, and Carmen had told Maya stories about her mother, about how she'd been a woman of incredible strength and grace. Your grandmother would have been so proud of you, Carmen had said, squeezing Maya's hand. She always said that the most important thing in life wasn't what you had, but what you gave. She'd be proud of the person you're becoming. Maya had thought about the dress that day. She'd thought about it often over the years. She'd wondered who had received it. She'd wondered if it had made a difference. She'd never expected to find out. It happened on a Tuesday afternoon in October. Maya was volunteering at the community center, the same place where she'd donated the dress 5 years earlier. She was helping with a youth mentoring program, working with younger kids who were struggling in school. A woman had come in to drop off supplies for the program. She was professional, put together, with kind eyes and an air of quiet competence. She was introducing herself to the staff, explaining that she wanted to give back to the community that had helped her during a difficult time. "I'm Elena Rodriguez," she'd said. "5 years ago, I lost everything in the flood. This community center and the people here helped me rebuild my life. I want to help others the way I was helped." Maya had been listening from across the room, not really paying attention until something made her look up. Elena was wearing a blue dress with white flowers. Maya's breath caught in her throat. It couldn't be. Could it? She'd walked over slowly, her heart pounding. "That's a beautiful dress," she'd said, her voice barely above a whisper. Elena had looked down at the dress, and a soft smile had crossed her face. "It is, isn't it? It's very special to me. It was a gift from a stranger 5 years ago. It changed my life." Maya's hands had started to shake. "Really? How?" Elena had looked at her more carefully then, as if really seeing her for the first time. "I was at a charity drive, right here at this community center, after I'd lost my home in the flood. I was desperate, broken, hopeless, and I found this dress. There was a note inside it from a girl named Maya. The note said that I deserved to be happy. It sounds like a small thing, but it wasn't. That note, that dress, it gave me hope when I had none. It helped me believe in myself again. I wore it to job interviews, and I got a job. I rebuilt my life." Maya felt tears streaming down her face. She couldn't speak. "Are you okay?" Elena asked, concerned. "I'm Maya," she whispered. "I'm the one who donated the dress." Elena's eyes went wide. For a moment, she just stared at Maya, as if she couldn't quite believe what she was hearing. Then she pulled Maya into an embrace, and both of them were crying. "You," Elena said, holding her at arm's length. "You were just a child. You gave away something precious to help a stranger." "I didn't know if it mattered," Maya said. "I didn't know if it would help." "It saved my life," Elena said simply. "It literally saved my life. When I was at my lowest point, when I thought I couldn't go on, your gift reminded me that I was worthy of good things, that I deserved to be happy. You gave me that. You, a child with nothing, gave me everything." They talked for hours that day. Elena told Maya about the years after the flood, about living in the shelter, about the failed job interviews, about the moment she'd put on the dress and felt like herself again. She told her about getting the job, about finding an apartment, about rebuilding her life. She told her about Sophia and Marcus, her children, who were now thriving in school. "I've thought about you every single day for 5 years," Elena said. "I've wondered who you were, what your life was like, whether you knew what your gift had meant. And now here you are. You're beautiful and kind, and I can see that you're the same person who donated that dress, someone with a good heart." Maya learned that Elena had been promoted to office manager. She'd taken business classes at night. She'd worked her way up. She'd built a life that was stable and happy. "I want to do something for you," Elena said. "I want to help you the way you helped me." "You don't owe me anything," Maya said. "I know I don't owe you," Elena said. "But I want to. I want to give back. What do you need? What are your dreams?" Maya had hesitated. She'd been accepted to a good university, but her family couldn't afford it. She'd been planning to go to community college instead, to work her way through school. It would take longer, but it was the only way. "I want to go to university," she'd said quietly. but it's expensive. Elena had smiled. Let me help. Let me give you what you gave me. A chance. A chance to become everything you're meant to be. And that's how it had started. Elena had helped Maya with her university applications. She'd helped her navigate financial aid. When Maya had been accepted to a prestigious university with a partial scholarship, Elena had helped fill the gap. She'd paid for Maya's first year of tuition. This isn't charity, Elena had insisted when Maya had tried to refuse. This is me honoring what you did for me. This is me passing forward the kindness you showed me. This is how the world works. We help each other. We lift each other up. Maya had gone to university. She'd studied social work, wanting to dedicate her life to helping people the way she'd always wanted to. She'd worked part-time to help pay for her education. But Elena's support had made it possible for her to focus on her studies, to get good grades, to build a future. And as Maya was building her future, Elena was also building on hers. Elena had started a nonprofit organization dedicated to helping flood victims and other people in crisis. She'd called it the Dress Project, named after the blue dress that had changed her life. The organization provided emergency assistance, job training, mental health support, and other resources to help people rebuild after disaster. The first thing Elena had done was establish a scholarship fund in Maya's name. It was called the Maya's Gift Scholarship, and it provided financial support to students from low-income backgrounds who wanted to study social work or community development. Elena had also started a program where people could donate clothing and other items, and volunteers would help match those items with people who needed them. But more importantly, they'd include notes of encouragement, messages of hope, just like Maya had done with the dress. Every item that goes out of here carries a message, Elena would tell her volunteers. It carries the message that someone believes in the person receiving it, that someone thinks they deserve good things, that someone sees their potential. The program had grown. Other people had heard about it and had wanted to help. Businesses had started donating items. Volunteers had started writing notes of encouragement. The Dress Project had expanded to help not just flood victims, but anyone in crisis. People experiencing homelessness, people who'd lost jobs, people who were struggling. And it had all started with a girl who had given away her most precious possession. 5 years after Maya donated the dress, the ripples were still spreading. A young man named David, the same David who'd had holes in his shoes in Maya's class, had received a donated suit jacket from the Dress Project. The jacket had come with a note of encouragement, and David had worn it to a job interview. He'd gotten the job. He'd worked his way up. Now he was in college, studying business, and he volunteered with the Dress Project, helping other young people believe in themselves. A woman named Jasmine, the girl Maya had shared her lunch with, had received a donated blouse from the Dress Project. Jasmine's family had fallen into homelessness after her father's illness. The blouse had given her confidence to apply for jobs. She'd gotten work as a receptionist. She'd gotten her family into housing. Now she was a case manager with the Dress Project, helping other families navigate the system. The ripples kept spreading. One act of kindness had created a wave that was touching hundreds of lives, thousands of lives. And it had all started with a girl who had nothing but a generous heart. Elena still owned it. She kept it in a special case, preserved carefully. It was no longer just a dress. It was a symbol. It was proof that one person's sacrifice could change the world. It was proof that kindness mattered. It was proof that even when you had nothing, you could give everything. Sometimes, Elena would take it out and look at it. She'd think about that day in the community center when she'd found it. She'd think about the note inside. She'd think about how a child's gift had saved her life. And sometimes she'd cry, because she understood the magnitude of what Maya had done. She understood that Maya had given away something precious, not just the dress, but a connection to her grandmother, a symbol of love and hope. Maya had given that away to a stranger, not knowing if it would help, not knowing if it would matter. But it had mattered. It had changed everything. The dress had never really been about the fabric or the flowers or the faded blue color. The dress had been about love. It had been about the belief that even in the darkest times, good things could happen. It had been about the power of one person to change another person's life. Maya had learned that lesson when she was 12 years old, standing in a community center, deciding whether to give away the only beautiful thing she owned. And now, at 22 years old, she was dedicating her life to teaching that same lesson to others. She was going to help people believe in themselves. She was going to help them see their own potential. She was going to help them understand that they deserved good things, even when circumstances suggested otherwise. She was going to pass forward the kindness that had been shown to her by her grandmother, who'd given her the dress. She was going to pass forward the hope that Elena had felt when she'd received it. She was going to pass forward the belief that one person's sacrifice could change the world. Because it could. It had. And it would continue to, so as long as there were people willing to give, willing to hope, willing to believe in each other. The dress had come full circle, and the story was far from over. 10 years after Maya had donated the dress, the world had changed in ways both expected and unexpected. Maya was now 27 years old, and she was the director of community outreach for the Dress Project. The organization had grown exponentially, expanding to 15 cities across the country. What had started as Elena's personal mission to give back had become a national movement. The headquarters of the Dress Project was located in a renovated warehouse in the downtown area. It was a space filled with energy and purpose. Volunteers sorted through donations. Case managers worked with clients. A small team of social workers, including Maya, provided counseling and support services. On the walls of the office, there were photographs, hundreds of them. Each one told a story of transformation. There was David, now a successful business owner, standing in front of his first store. There was Jasmine, accepting an award for her work as a community advocate. There were families who'd received assistance. Families who'd gone from homelessness to stability, from despair to hope. And in the center of the main conference room, in a climate-controlled display case, was the dress. The blue dress with the white flowers had become the symbol of the Dress Project. It was the story they told. It was the inspiration that guided their work. Visitors to the office would stand in front of the case and read the placard. This dress was donated in 2020 by Maya, then 12 years old. It was received by Elena Rodriguez, a flood victim who had lost everything. The dress gave Elena hope when she had none. It changed her life. It inspired the Dress Project, an organization dedicated to the belief that one person's kindness can change the world. But the dress had also become something more. It had become a symbol of a larger truth that Maya and Elena had discovered through their work. That kindness wasn't just about individual acts of charity. It was about systemic change. It was about creating a world where everyone had access to opportunity, where everyone was treated with dignity, where everyone believed they deserved good things. What had started as a program to distribute donated items had become something much more comprehensive. They now offered emergency assistance programs for people experiencing crisis, job training and placement services, to help people find employment, mental health counseling, to address the trauma of poverty and loss, educational scholarships to help young people access higher education, housing support to help people transition from homelessness to stable living situations, financial literacy programs to help people build wealth and stability. Community organizing initiatives to advocate for policy changes that would address systemic poverty. Elena had become the executive director, and she'd assembled a team of passionate, dedicated professionals who believed in the mission. Many of them were people who'd been helped by the Dress Project themselves. They understood, from personal experience, the power of compassion and support. Maya had become the heart of the organization's community outreach work. She was the one who went into neighborhoods, who listened to people's stories, who helped them understand that they deserved better. She was the one who embodied the spirit of the dress, the belief that everyone deserved hope, that everyone deserved a chance. 5 years into the Dress Project's work, they'd faced a significant challenge. A major donor had pulled their funding after learning that the organization was becoming more activist-oriented, advocating for policy changes that the donor disagreed with. The organization had nearly collapsed. They'd had to lay off staff. They'd had to scale back programs. For a moment, it had seemed like the dream was ending. But that's when something unexpected happened. A documentary filmmaker named James had heard about the Dress Project. He'd become fascinated by the story. The girl who'd donated the dress, the woman who'd received it, the organization that had grown from that single act of kindness. He'd asked if he could make a documentary about the organization. Elena and Maya had been hesitant. They didn't want to make this about themselves. They wanted to focus on the people they served, on the stories of transformation. But James had convinced them. "Your story matters," he'd said. "Not because of you, but because it shows what's possible. It shows that one person can change the world. That's a story people need to hear right now." So they'd agreed. James had spent 2 years making the documentary. He'd followed Maya as she worked with clients. He'd interviewed Elena about her journey from homelessness to success. He'd talked to dozens of people whose lives had been changed by the Dress Project. He'd filmed in the neighborhoods where they worked, showing the realities of poverty and struggle. The documentary was called The Dress One Gift: Infinite Possibilities. It premiered at a major film festival and was picked up by a streaming platform. It went viral. Within weeks, millions of people had watched it. The story of Maya's gift, of Elena's transformation, of the Dress Project's work, had touched something deep in people's hearts. Social media was filled with people sharing their own stories of kindness, their own experiences of being helped by strangers, their own desires to give back. Donations poured in. Volunteers signed up. Other organizations reached out, wanting to partner with the Dress Project, wanting to replicate the model in their own communities. The organization didn't just survive the funding crisis, it thrived. Within a year, they'd not only restored the programs they'd had to cut, but they'd expanded significantly. They'd opened new offices. They'd hired more staff. They'd reached more people. It was the letters. After the documentary aired, Maya received thousands of letters. People from all over the country, from all over the world, wrote to her. They wrote about their own struggles. They wrote about moments when they'd felt hopeless and had found hope. They wrote about times when they'd given to others and had been surprised by the impact. They wrote about how the documentary had inspired them to be kinder, to be more generous, to believe that their actions mattered. One letter came from a woman named Sarah. Sarah had been homeless for 3 years. She'd watched the documentary in a shelter, and it had given her hope. She'd connected with the Dress Project services, received job training and support, and had found employment. She'd gotten into housing. She was rebuilding her life. She wrote, "Your story saved my life. When I watched the documentary, I realized that I deserved good things too, that my life mattered, that I could change my circumstances. Thank you for showing me that kindness exists in the world. Thank you for believing in me when I didn't believe in myself." Another letter came from a boy named Marcus, Elena's son, now a teenager. He wrote, "Mom tells me all the time about the girl who gave her the dress, the girl who saved our family. Now I understand that it wasn't just about the dress. It was about believing in people. It was about seeing their potential even when they can't see it themselves. I want to dedicate my life to doing what you do, helping people believe in themselves." Maya kept all the letters. She read them when she was tired, when she was discouraged, when she wondered if her work was making a difference. The letters reminded her that it was. The letters showed her the ripples of kindness spreading out, touching lives in ways she could never have predicted. Maya received a call from her mother. Carmen was crying, not sad crying, but happy crying. "Baby, you need to come home," Carmen said. "Something wonderful has happened." Maya drove to her mother's house, the modest home that they'd moved into when Maya was 17. When she arrived, she found her mother waiting on the porch, and she was beaming. "What's going on?" Maya asked, confused. "Come inside," Carmen said. Inside, Maya found a young girl sitting at the kitchen table. She couldn't have been more than 12 years old. She had dark hair and dark eyes, and she looked nervous. "This is Rosa," Carmen said. "She's the granddaughter of Mrs. Hernandez, who used to live in our old apartment building. Do you remember Mrs. Hernandez?" Maya nodded. She remembered the elderly woman who'd lived across the hall from them when they were poor. "Mrs. Hernandez passed away last year," Carmen explained. "And in her will, she left something for you." Carmen handed Maya an envelope. Inside was a letter, written in shaky handwriting. "Dear Maya, I have watched you grow up. I have seen the kindness in your heart. I have seen how you give to others, even when you have nothing. I have watched you become a woman who changes the world. When I was a young girl, someone showed me kindness. Someone believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. That kindness changed my life. I have spent my life trying to pass that kindness forward. Now I am old and I am dying. I want to leave something behind. I want to leave a legacy of kindness. I am leaving money in my will to establish a scholarship fund in your name. The money will help young girls from low-income backgrounds go to college, just like you did. I want these girls to have the same opportunities you had. I want them to know that they deserve good things. You changed my life, Maya. Not directly, you probably don't even remember me. But I watched you. I saw your kindness. I was inspired by it. And now I want to pass that inspiration forward. Thank you for being the kind of person who makes the world better. With love and gratitude, Mrs. Hernandez. Maya read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down her face. There's more, Carmen said gently. She handed Maya another envelope. Mrs. Hernandez's granddaughter, Rosa, has been struggling. She's a good student, but her family doesn't have much money. Mrs. Hernandez wanted you to meet her. She wanted you to know that the scholarship fund will help girls like Rosa. Maya looked at Rosa, and she saw herself at that age. She saw a girl with potential, a girl who deserved a chance, a girl who could change the world if given the opportunity. Hi, Rosa, Maya said softly. Tell me about your dreams. One act of kindness, a girl giving away a dress, had created a wave that touched generation after generation. Mrs. Hernandez, inspired by watching Maya's kindness, had created a scholarship fund. That fund would help girls like Rosa access education and opportunity. Those girls would go on to help others, creating their own ripples of kindness. The dress had become more than just a symbol. It had become a legacy. It had become proof that one person's actions could echo through time, touching lives across generations, creating a world that was incrementally more kind, more just, more compassionate. She thought about her 12-year-old self, standing in the community center, making the decision to give away her most precious possession. She thought about Elena, broken and hopeless, finding hope in a faded blue dress and a note from a stranger. She thought about all the lives that had been changed as a result. She thought about Mrs. Hernandez, watching from her apartment across the hall, seeing kindness and being inspired by it. She thought about Rosa, a girl who would now have opportunities because of a chain of kindness that had started 15 years ago. She thought about the thousands of people whose lives had been touched by the Dress Project. She thought about the volunteers who gave their time. She thought about the donors who gave their money. She thought about the case managers and social workers who gave their hearts. And she understood something profound. This was how the world changed, not through grand gestures or massive movements, but through small acts of kindness that rippled outward, touching lives, inspiring others, creating a wave of compassion that grew stronger with each person it touched. One dress, one girl, one act of generosity. That's all it took to change the world. And the story was still being written. The ripples were still spreading. The legacy was still growing.